With the help of Hashem, we are learning Beitzah, Daf, Zayin. We already left off 16 lines from the top of the Amid, or 5 lines into the wide lines. We're going to learn more about from what developmental point onwards is an egg no longer considered meat, no longer considered part of the chicken. For example, can you eat it with milk? Is it pareve or is it fleishiks? Because it's developed from the mother, from the chicken itself. And we're going to have a phenomenal mitzias. The Gemara is going to tell us that hens only lay fertilized eggs during the daytime of the day. And we'll see a very important practical nafkamina from the above fact. We're going to learn a big chiddush that even though normally davar sheyesh lo matirin, something that halachically will be compromissible, is not subject to the rules of nullification, afilu be'elaf lo batel. If there is an additional roiv involved, if there's a majority involved, then we could be, and sometimes we will allow for bittul to happen. That's a big chiddush that we're going to have here. At least so is Shitas Toisvis. And on Daf Zayin Amud Beis, we're going to go back to the first Mishnah in the Masechta, both concerning the second case, Beishamai Beisilo, regarding what is the minimum shiur needed by chametz and or by sa'or for one to violate Bal Yemotzei on Pesach, whether it's the same smaller amount, that's the chumrah of Beisilo, or like Beishamai again, who's lenient, that holds that there is by sa'or, a leavening agent, chimutzei kasha, even a kazayas. But for chametz, you're only over Bal Yirah, Bal Yemotzei if you are in possession of a koisevis, the size of a date, which is a little bit less than an egg, but it's a lot more than a kazayas. And then, God willing, we're going to go back to the third case and the final case of the first Mishnah in Masechtas Beitzah, machlekes again by Shammai and Beisilo, regarding shechting a chaya, shechting an oif on Yom Tiv, the issue of there's on one hand a mitzvah of covering their blood with earth, kisui dam ba'afar, normally getting earth out of the ground, as we'll continue to learn for sure also in tomorrow's daf, will be in violation of, or in potential violation of a few different avos and of muktzah. Nevertheless, Beishamai seems to be saying that one could shech a chayiv oif. We'll understand better. The Mishnah says with the spade that's in the ground and cover it. We'll see exactly what the Mishnah means. Beis Hillel, again for the third time in the version of our Mishnah, is more machmid, and really there's going to be one very beautiful nekuda, and that is whenever there is a biblical obligation, normally a biblical obligation will overwrite the rabbinic restriction. And I know there are exceptions. I mean, Gzeira Darabba, sometimes the Chachamim have the koyach to tell you not to fulfill a biblical obligation. But those are exceptional cases. Normally, even when you have a rabbinic restriction, but if there is a moment where there is a chiyuv midoiraisa, then the doiraisa will override the midrabanan. The question will be, can you create such a scenario? Because what we will learn, hopefully today, for sure, God willing, into tomorrow, that the case of the Mishnah is where the digging is only max violating a derabanan. And since there is a mitzvah midoiraisa kisui dam ba'afar, so the doiraisa overrides the derabanan. The question is, can you create that scenario? And if you're going to hold like Beis Hillel that don't create that scenario, don't shecht. Now, if you shecht it, he already wrote in the Mishnah, then you can do it, and chevra a lot more. So again, Daf Zayin, we are 5 lines into the wide lines, towards the beginning of the line, Gufa, third word in the line. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sha'ar kol nehim dvarim. Says the Gemara Gufa we learned above, and we're quoting from the Beitzah that Hashoich the Satan Goyles, the person shechts a hen, matzah beitzim gemurais, and you find in it fully formed eggs, and we're learning as Rashi, Shitas Rashi, fully formed eggs is focusing on the yolk. As long as the yolk, as the yellow, is completely developed, I'm emphasizing that because L'shitas Rashi, even if the white is not fully developed, L'shitas Rashi, and that will have the clear in the Beitzah, even if the egg is still attached by connective tissue to the hen's ovary, the ikid, we're only looking on is the yolk, is the yellow developed, and if it is, says the Beitzah, mutaros la'achlan b'cholav, they are already considered something separate from the mother. Just not pshat that they only were not laid. The herst, it's that other than the yolk, l'rashi, other parts are not separated fully. One would have thought, it's part of the mother. L'mayin afkamina, listen, you shachted the mother. L'mayin afkamina, you shachted the mother, it's part of the mother, it's fleishiks. It's like having a polka. You can't have it with milk. I know that it's only midrabanan, we get that. But so what? It's also midrabanan to have chicken with milk. Says the Beitzah, at the moment of the Beitzah being gemurais, it's considered an egg, and therefore it's considered parav. Now we'll continue with that Beitzah. However, Zok the Beitzah, Rabbi Yaakov Oimer, no. Im hoyuma oirois begidin, if they are still attached by some sort of connective tissue. If Kevin would put up a picture, that would be amazing. If it would be the right picture, by connective tissue to the hen's ovary, if it's connected by tissue, I don't care that the yellow is developed. It's not yet considered something separated from the mother. It's considered part of the mother. Thus, fleishiks, you can't have it with milk. Now that we have this machlokes, man tana lohad tana rabbanan, who's the author of the Beitzah, where it says, now this Beitzah, we're going to dinei tumah v'tara, which is as follows. Normally a nevela, which means an animal, not normally, always, an animal that was not slaughtered, even if it is a kosher species, will be tamei, and it will be metama. That's the rule, even though nowadays we're not careful right the moment before Mashiach with the dinim of Tumah V'Tara here, because we're tummy anyways. So Shechita is primarily only to be mater, the animal to be eaten. But there's also a big part of Shechita that Shechita takes away Tumas Nevela. If the animal was not slaughtered, then it's Metame, has a level of an Av. There's how much of it, K'zayis min abasar, how much of the bones, etc., etc. If the bones, okay. Now, there's a very unique halacha when it comes to a nevela of a kosher bird species. It's called nivlas oif tahor. There's a paradox. On one hand, it's a nevela, so that bird is tamei, but it will not be metameyu by contact. It will not be metameyu if you carry it. Will not be metame b'mago b'mas. Umitzat sheni, if a person is going to eat it, aside of the prohibition of eating an nevela, we're not focusing on that. That's an aveda. But if a person is going to eat, God forbidden, oif tahor, when they swallow it, when they swallow the oif tahor, not only do they become tamei, but the clothings that they are wearing also becomes tamei, which is a big thing. Because normally a nevela has a status of an av. Whatever it has direct contact with goes down a notch, becomes a rishon. Clothing, which are called kalim, midoi raisa, kalim cannot become a sheni. So let's say if a person, were to touch an nevela of an animal, a carcass, or to eat it, it's touching it, eating it doesn't change. Aside of the aveda of treif, of nevelas, he'll be tamei, the garments will not be. Just to know the din. If a person eats a kazayas of a nevela of dafkan oif tahor, something that could have been kosher through shechita, it's a very high level of tumah. It's
a chicken, like
a chicken that died without shechita. There was no kosher shechita. Died. Someone cut the head off. Push it, and then someone went ahead and ate it. God forbid. Side of the isur of nevela, they're begun to make tamei. Now the Beitzah wants to know: is that true concerning all of the parts of the bird, or are there parts of the bird? None of it may be eaten, but it doesn't give off tumah, and the latter is correct. There are certain parts that are not considered the basar of the oif, and therefore it's not metama abeis abliyah. Basically, is when you swallow it. So says the Beitzah, if you eat min hasholol shal beitzim, if you eat from the cluster of eggs. Now the cluster of eggs means not the ovaries, but the cluster of eggs that are attached to with the connective tissue to the ovary. We'll see this is connected to our sugya. Or if a person eats from their bones of this bird, of this nevela, or from the sinews min hagidin, or umin habasar shenitlash min achai, flesh that was detached from the bird when the bird was still alive. We're focusing now not on isur machalas asuris. We're focusing now on dinei tuma v'tara. Here says the Beitzah, none of these parts are considered nivlas oif tar, and the person will remain tar. However, minha eshkol shel beitzim, we're going to interpret it as the Gemara will in a moment. If you're going to eat the ovary itself, the ovaries themselves are considered the meat already, or the kurkav on the crop, or umenema ayin the intestines, or if a person melted the fats, it's not meat, but it's the fats, and you ate it. Now melting it is just, again, it's just a practical, like how do you eat fats? It's so disgusting. You melted it and you ate it. Here says the Beitzah, all of it is considered part of the oif. That's called oif, and since the oif was an avela, if it's from a kosher species, it gives off, it's matama the adam and his begadim, right? Abeis abliyah. Now, says the Gemara, man tana min hashalosh shel beitzim tar. The first case here was that if a person ate from the cluster of eggs that are attached, it's not considered part. It's not considered part of the oif. So it must be Amar Rabbi Yosef the like Rabbi Yaakov. Beautiful connection, because according to Rabbi Yaakov regarding the dinim of fleishiks and milchiks, or fleishiks and parev, what did we just learn above? That that if they are attached by connective tissue, Rabbi Yaakov says they are asurais to be eaten with meat. Why? Because they're considered part of the chicken. If it's considered part of the chicken, then l'chu'ura, Gemara argues, according to Rabbi Yaakov, the Tana would not have said that you're tired. The Tana would have said that you're tamei. Counters the Gemara, Amalei Abaye to his teacher Rav Yosef, Nisht Mimahi Dilma, perhaps At Kan Lekam Rabbi Yaakov Hassan. The Beitzah that we just quoted might not be a din Torah, it might only be a derabanan and a chumra derabanan. Elo le'inyan isura, that midrabanan it's basar b'chalav. And the people here ask, hold on, isn't basar b'chalav by a chicken to begin with only midrabanan? Nice question. But I'm saying it's only the Rabbanan. And therefore, it's very interesting, Chavra. There are so many tumas the Rabbanan. And we all know that. But you should know that Chazal insist that midrabanan, we're not that quick in adding to new tumas the Rabbanan. There are plenty of them. But on the other hand, once the Chazal say that something is tamei, it spreads tuma. We don't want to spread tuma. So they don't always say, since we're going to get one halacha, machalas asura is basar b'chalav, we're going to midrabanan consider it part of the meat. It doesn't mean that automatically it will be the same for tuma, because by tuma, aval le'inyan tuma loy, there's no such a decree. Ay v'chitema le'inyan tuma nami nigzar, why wouldn't you? So the Gemara explains, because this is the one-liner that afushe tumahu, if they would have made that decree, it would have increased tuma. Va'afushe tuma midrabanan loy mefashinan. Yes, we know that there's so many tumas derabanan, but every time they hesitated. You know, there was the counter. There's a downside. They don't want to add the tuma. So here they did not add the rabbanan. So lav dafke, it has to follow the loike Rabbi Yaakov. There was another version of how this Beitzah from the dinim of Tuma was introduced to our topic over there in the yeshiva. And there, when they learned not the opening line in the Beitzah where it says min hashalol shel beitzim, but when they learned the first part of the Beitzah that's speaking about that which is part of the mother, which is the eshkol shel beitzim. Now we already interpreted it means the ovary itself. But in the Havamina, they didn't understand it that way. So when they read the line that if you eat the eshkol shel beitzim, then you're tamei. So on that, Amar Rabbi Yosef, that is Rabbi Yaakov. Because that's Rabbi Yaakov that says, concerning our dinim of parev, of fleishiks, im hoyama oiros beginim asurais. And for that, Amalei Abaya, no. Mimai the eshkol, why are you interpreting the words of the Beitzah there by dinei tuma? That eshkol means if someone is going to eat that which is hanging from the ovaries by connective tissue, that's not a pshat in the Beitzah. Then actually you would have a problem how to understand the opening part of the Beitzah. The Gemara doesn't walk you through all those steps. The Gemara just says, Dilma, maybe eshkol means eshkol gufei, the ovaries itself. Now the problem with that would be, why does the Beitzah even have to tell you that if you eat the ovaries of a chicken, that's called chicken? The ovaries are meaty. That's basar from the oif. And v'chi teime eshkol gufa l'mayla memra. Why would the Beitzah need to mention it? Well, let me answer you like a yid with another kasha. Why did the Beitzah have to speak about the kurkavan, the crop? It's also meaty. Why did the Beitzah have to speak about the intestines? Pshita, the Torah says that's the din. It's a din Torah that if a person eats nivlas oif tar, it gives off tuma beis Aliyah. The aflagav the basaninu. Nevertheless, you know why the Beitzah enumerates these animal parts? Because kiven the iki inchi yachli, since people don't eat them. So it's rachlashma idan that even if it's not, let's say it's the darkoi, you can say shaloy kedarach achilose. That whole part is normally not eaten. The Mishnah, the Beitzah has to tell you that nevertheless it gives off tuma. So hachinami kiven the iki inchi yachli. Not everyone eats the ovaries of a chicken, especially after Kevin put up a picture, bleeding that I will never eat that, whatever that was over there. So you don't want to eat it. So the Beitzah has to tell you, but if someone did, then it's going to give off tumah. Okay. Weiter. Says the Gemara Tanach Rabbanon. Now that we know that if an egg was laid on Yom Tiv, right, we're not allowed to eat it because we paskin like Beisilo. Whether it's an Isur Doiraisa Hachana Darabba, whether it's a very strict Darabanan Muktzah, Quasi Doiraisa, whether it's a Gezerah, Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yitzchak, whichever one it is, listen to this Gavaldik statement. Kol Shetashmishi Bayoim, any species that mate, that the genders mate only during the daytime of the day, that species, whenever the mother will give birth, she will give birth only during the daytime of the day. Noilad bayoim. And the same thing in the opposite, that all species, shetashmisha, that they only mate during the nighttime. Noilad, whenever there is a birth happening, it will only happen at night. However, kol shetashmisha, bein bayoim, bein balayla, any species which mate during the day, during the night, Noilad, then their children will be born, bein bayoim, bein balayla. The Beitzah explains, what are we talking about? Examples, and all of this is very negei lahalacha, as we'll see in a moment. Says the Beitzah, kol shetashmisha bayoim, noilad bayoim, as an example, zutar nagoilas. It's good to know that. Where was it? I think it was in Eretz Yisrael, where they figured out that since it's born only during the day, so they put the chickens in these places where they have light that looks like daylight, and instead of it being 12 hours day, 12 hours night, they got the daytime to be 6 hours, the night 6 hours, and instead of it laying an egg once in 24 hours, they lay an egg every 12 hours. So it's day, night, next day, egg, night, day, egg. It gives birth by year. Kol shetashmisha balayla, noilad only by layla zu atolev, bats, coronas, only at night. Kol shetashmisha b'meim balayla. Oh, so what is that? It's just an example. Adam. Human beings, they can mate any time. And v'chol the damele. Okay. Now, Amar Mar, let's apply this lahalacha. We're going to focus only on the reisha, about the tarnagoylas, and it's gavaldik. Kol, Amar Mar, kol shetashmisha bayoim. Any species that only mates during the day. Noilad, only during the day, says the Beitzah zu tarnagoylas. Says the Gemara L'may nafkamina. What will be a halachic consequence? Says the Gemara Lichad Rav Mani b'rei Rav Kahana. Listen to this case, Chevra. You have a chicken coop. It's Erev Yom Tiv. You know that if an egg was laid on Yom Tiv, you may not take it. Oh, so what happened was right prior to Yom Tiv, you went into the kina, you went into the nest, because if there would be any eggs there, you would take it out. You would want to take it out. Now, as we'll see in a moment, this is only true concerning fertilized eggs. We'll get to that soon. But you're going into your chicken coop. From a yid will take all of the eggs out prior to Yom Tiv, because anything that's born on Yom Tiv, boy bayoim, will be awesome. You go in there, you're a badik b'kina shatana goyla me'erev Yom Tiv v'lei matzah b'beitz. There's nothing there. Now, ulamachar hishkim, the next day you woke up, hishkim means dafke, far tugs. You woke up before daylight. You woke up 4 a.m. It's not day yet. And then you, for some reason, you're bored. You looked inside the chicken kina, and you find an egg. It's gavaldik. If not for this Beitzah, what would you say? I looked in the nest before Shkia, before Yom Tov, there was nothing there. This was born overnight. And therefore, Noilad B'Yom Tov, boy, today I can't use it. Now that the Tana is telling you a rule that hens don't lay eggs at night, you say it was laid before Yom Tov. Because it's still night now. Hishkim is not early in the morning, it's right before morning. Beitzah muteres. It's a muzayin that it was born before Yom Tov. Hold on, but v'haloi badak? So you tell yourself, Ema, loy badak yafa yafa. First of all, you didn't look that good. Number two, because some people say, I know me, it was I boydek ya ordin, the nest is this big, you understand? Sometimes it's so little, you can't miss it. So the Beitzah says, Vafilu badak yafa yafa. We're going back to something we learned earlier up on the Amid. There is something that's not common, but it's shayach that an egg should leave the mother beroiv. That was one of the ways of understanding Rav's statement. Then it went back in. Remember? And Rabbi Yechanan says that since it already exited the mother, in its majority, it's considered as if it's born. And even though it went back in the mother, and then it came out on Yom Tov, it's no longer included in this Beitzah that was Noilad B'Yom Tov. Even L'Beisilol, you can eat it, because it was really halachically born prior to Yom Tov. So if it came out at night, okay, you know what the pshat was? It really came out at day, Erev Yom Tov, Roiv, went back into the mother. That can leave the mother's stomach during the night. But that doesn't have the halacha of a Beitzah Shana L'B'Yom Tov. Beautiful. Ema Yatzaruba and V'chazra Havoi and following Rabbi Yechanan, you can have the egg. This is great. It's good. Says the Gemara, Eini, 1 second. V'ha'omar Rabbi Yosi ben Shol Omar Rav. Yeah, it's an amoida, but we got a problem here. What does he say? He writes clearly that Badak B'Kina Shol Tana Goyla, same case. You looked in the nest. Mamish, Me'erev Yom Tov means not in the morning. Like Ben Hashmashes, like you looked at the last moment. Because a Yid knows I can't have eggs that are laid. Let me chaparain and have all the eggs that I could. By removing them, you went there the last moment out of Yom Tov. And v'li matzah Beitzah, mamish this case. Ulamachanan, the next morning, Hishkim, you woke up before daybreak. Umatzah Beitzah. So Rabbi Yosi ben Shol says in the name of Rav Asura. The Metzias. I looked, there was no eggs. Now there is an egg. It must have been born during the night. That's on Yom Tov. Answers the Gemara, this doesn't contradict our application. Don't forget the nafkamina of the Beitzah was given by Amoyroim. It's not a kasher from a Tana. We said Lamai nafkamina that the Beitzah says Kol shatashmishe bayoim noilad bayoim. For this case, here's the difference. This is another important step in the Metzias. That Hassan b'desafna me'ara, unfertilized eggs could be born at night. So let's go back. When a person was looking through the hen Erev Yom Tov, it wasn't because they want to eat it. You can't have fertilized eggs. That's the whole issue. Or for fertilized eggs, that's where really the whole idea of a blutstrop, halachically, comes in. If there is a blood spot from a fertilized egg, it's in the Isur Doiraisa. Which is why people used to be so careful by checking all the eggs. The reason why nowadays, we spoke about this in Chulin, we'll speak about this in other times, we're so much more lenient. Now there's a minhag to get rid of the blood. But it's a common practice now that in the big bakeries here, they don't check it. Because all of the eggs that we get are unfertilized. But anyways, coming back to this halacha. Hassan b'desafna ma'ara. Safna ma'ara could be born at night. So the Gemara is going to ask that in a moment. It's gavaldik. Hold on. Ihachi that have money nami. So again, it may be ma'ara safna. Like, what are you telling me? You were boidik, loy badak yafa yafa. Say no, it was born at night. And the egg that was born is unfertilized. So the Gemara says, whenever there is a zachar, all of the eggs are fertilized. Even if there is a male there, there's a rooster there, every single egg is going to be fertilized? Yeah. Amar Avini, Gemeeting. They're very busy over there, these chevra. Kol heicha the ika zachar, whenever there is a male in the vicinity, there is no such a thing as a hen laying an egg that's unfertilized. There is no such a thing. Zachar loisaf va'at kama. So va'at kama means how far. There has to be a limit. Like, where exactly was the rooster? There is a certain space, distance. If the rooster was that far, then then the hen warmed itself by the ground and it laid an egg. It stimulated the ovaries from the earth, but it wasn't fertilized, not with the male. So, Omar va'at.
You won't do it with that. If there is a zachar in the area, the chicken, whatever the hen, won't warm up the person.
Won't warm herself up. She's waiting for the male. Exactly. That's what we're learning about. Kama Omar Rav Gamda Bishmei Derav Kol Heicha Daf Zayin Omid Beis Deshama Koile Biyamama. As long as the rooster is close enough that all of the hens in the area can hear that rooster, they will not warm themselves in the ground. They will wait for the rooster to come, and therefore all of the eggs that they will lay will be fertilized eggs. Now it's interesting when the Gemara says that it has to hear the sound of the rooster during the day. The top Tosfos explains a beautiful rule. At night, sound travels farther. And that's because, today for sure, there's so much noise in the world that we live in. We're not, it's crazy. Koil hamama deroimi, it's called. Here from the cars, from the planes. So at night, there's a lot less, let's say, white noise or background noise, so our sounds travel a lot further. Now, why don't we say that if it hears the sound at night, it's not going to warm itself on the ground? Because they don't mate at night. One thing is connected to the other. That's the Tosfos. Look inside Tosfos. Ubalayla mashmiim koilon l'merachik yoisim mibayayim. So why not that? But because since the hens are only aware of it during the daytime, anytime during the day. If they can hear the rooster, they're going to wait for the rooster. So very good. So fertilized eggs will only be laid by yoim. Unfertilized eggs can be laid at night. So that's enough kamina. Okay. Avad Rav Mari Uvda, and the Gemara says that there was a shaila. In other words, there was a person that came with the same thing. They were boidik their nest. There was out of bein hashmashes. It was not born out of yontif. They were boidik yafa. Then they wake up before the break of dawn. They find an egg. They wanted to know from Rav Mari whether they can eat it or not. So since Rav Mari asked, within 16 houses, now Mastama, the houses there was not like here in America, but the houses had a certain standard size because it was a distance. Since within 60 houses from all directions there was no rooster, therefore what? Therefore it must have not been, it was not fertilized. If it's not fertilized, it's possible for it to be born during the night. And he paskin that way.
60 houses, huh?
60 houses. Or if the opposite, if there was a rooster there within 60 houses, if that was the case, then he said that it's mutter. Then he said it was mutter because...
What, they were crowded, those houses?
Lav dafka. I think a rooster taka travels a lot. Yeah. It's a long, listen, voices carry far. And don't forget, then there wasn't as much noise. Okay, and now the Gemara adds, however, even if it's within this proximity, there's a few details here. There's about the hen waiting for the rooster, but then will the rooster go to the hen? So the rooster will go to all the hens, if it could. But if there is a nara, if there is a body of water, roosters are not the greatest swimmers, and it's not kedai for them to go risk it. Okay, so they're not going to go. But if there's a bridge, then even if there's river, then they're going to go over the bridge. But it's valdik. Mitzra means there is a rope bridge. It's difficult to cross over. Then lo yavra. But 1 second, hava uvda. But there was a case where there was a river and there was only a rope bridge, and someone saw the rooster going on it. V'avda mitzra. So once that happened, Chazal retracted the last statement. No, if there's a rope bridge and it's within this distance that the shama koyle biyamama, then you have to be, then you assume l'kula that the hen was fertilized. A hen is fertilized, will only give birth during the day, even if you were boidik the nest bein hashmashes. Then before break of dawn, and you see now an egg, you say either you were not boidik well, or ked Rabbi Yochanan that it was born at night, but that halachically was already laid during the day because it already was laid ruba yesterday at of Yontif. How great is that? We're going back now to Rabbi Yossi ben Shaul, where he's machmer. He says that if you made that bidik, it's going to be usher. Why will it be usher? Because b'desafna me'ara, like we said, because a unfertilized egg will be born even at night. Oy bazoi, my iriya badak. Why do you even need for someone to be boidik prior to Yontiv? Ki loy badak nami. Even if you didn't make a bedika, if you didn't make a bedika erev Yontiv, so it could have been born erev. It could have been born at night Yontiv, right? So now we have, if you remember, we learned a few daf ago. There's a klal that davar sheyesh le'matirin. You have to be machmir with the davar sheyesh le'matirin. And the way we learned Rashi's Pshat and Avashi, it's not only that it's not batal, since we find davar sheyesh le'matirin, it's not batal. We're sveika yasser. We're machmir. So why we should always be machmir, even if you didn't make a bedika. Making a bedika means that if you have a doubt, if you were not boidik erev Yontif, you only looked at it right before morning's Yontif day. Now you find an egg. It's mashma that you could say it was born during the day. Why? Maybe it was born during the night. So it's a doubt. Even if the issur of having an egg that's laid on Yontif is an issur midrabanan, and normally safek drabanan lekula davar sheyesh lamatirin. Says the Gemara, a very important rule that ki loy badak ema me'esmal avoy, that even unfertilized eggs, this is important, the vast majority of them are also only born during the day. Like today, all of these mass-made, and they like we mentioned, they make cycles of lesser time. These are not fertilized eggs. It's normally born during the day. And davar sheyesh lematirin is not going to be used to go against such a roiv. That's the second places. That's a big statement. If you made a bedika, that's the word. You checked it. You didn't see anything during the day. So then l'chayre was born at night. Here you have to say that it was taka born during the night. The stretch that we say, loy badak yafa yafa, or it came out, that's already not something that we say. So the Gemara says that's already a push. That's already a very rare. So we learned an interesting, for us city boys, we can feel a little bit like the king is in the field. Now we became players. Say the peasants, and that's nothing wrong to be a humble peasant. Okay, now that we quoted the statement from Rabbi Yossi ben Shalom Arav, now we're going to quote another statement. Not l'choira, at least the way we're learning legirsa style, the content is not connected, but the Baal HaMemra is that what? High tuma shechika, ground or liquefied garlic, sakanta ligiluye, is dangerous for it to be left exposed. Like Rashi reminds us, that's the whole sugya of water that's left exposed, of milk that's left exposed, that wine, there's something about garlic. Rashi here writes again, that certain venomous creatures, lamashal and nachash, when they'll find liquefied garlic, they'll love that. They'll come and drink it, and whenever there's a chashash that a creature that gives off venom will drink, what they do is, they drink, and then they put some of their poison. Because they could, or to cover up the fact that they stole, so they replace it with poison, or however the psychology works over there by the snake. So there's a special chashash of garlic that's shechika, not to leave it uncovered. I want you to know that we paskin, the Alter Rebbe brings in Shulchan Aruch B'chlal, me'ingen, not exactly the same, but onions and garlic. I know this is not brought in the big Shulchan Aruch, the Alter Rebbe writes it in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, that is peeled and left overnight is something that we may not eat. There's a sakana involved, and even if it was in a package, even if it's in your fridge, so don't buy those big trays.
If you have some
You have to have something on it, unless there's something on it. So even if there's a little bit of the onion peel on it, it's okay. If there's a little bit of the garlic peel in it, it's okay. According to the OU that they follow this, they'll give a hechsher, if I'm not mistaken, if there's a little bit of oil. Some people say even a little bit of salt. But that goes also for eggs, just to be aware of that. Alter Rebbe passes eggs, garlic, there might be other things that's not coming to my mind, that there's a big, the Alter Rebbe writes, and chamiras hakanta misura, to be very careful. Remember a while back, I used to always buy from one of the markets, kosher markets, that had these little things of garlic that's peeled, so you don't have to get your hands all smellied up. It's not good. Doesn't matter that it's in a package.
In the fridge.
In the fridge. No, nicht gut. Unless it was already, they added some. Now, but the klal is today in this world that we live in, when they don't just add salt, they add certain poisons to make it last longer. They're like the snake. So don't eat it, because that's what the Gemara is saying. Nishtahen. You gotta get your hands smelly if you want to eat garlic.
This goes on eggs also?
This goes on eggs also. Yes, so if your wife, if some of us, or today, the man, if you prepare the ayelach mitzibel, you got to add something in there. You got to add, if you prepare something out of Shabbos for Shabbos, put some salt. Some people say it's more than just salt, but I can at least put some salt. Okay, weiter. Now, Chevra, let's chaparein. So we're gonna go back to the Mishnah Daf Beis Amud Aleph. The second machlokes Tanoim Beis Shammai Beis Hillel concerning Yom Tov, in which Beis Shammai is the mekel and Beis Hillel is the machmer, was punkt menegei adin in Pesach. We're not speaking about the Isur Achila. We are speaking about the Isur that's known as Bal Yei Motzei. We may not own in our possession our chametz over Pesach. How much of it is in violation? Isurim have shiurim. So Beis Shammai yoimrim concerning Bal Yei Motzei, that there is a difference between so'oir. I'm just going to use the word so'oir, but so'oir refers to a leavening agent. It's that is so chametzdik that if you put it in other doughs, it instigates the other doughs of becoming chametzdik. It's called chimutzei kasha. Okay, leaven. Chametz means tama dough, flour and water. Flour and water, unless it's sitting a long time together, it will itself slowly, it will become chametz. It takes a much longer time. Chametz is not chimutzei kasha. So oid is inedible. Another thing, it's so stark. So Beis Shammai says, so oid, even only a kazayis is in violation of Al Yimatzah. Chametz, Beis Shammai says, you're only oivin on a koisevis. Koisevis is more than a kazayis, less than a Beitzah, even though there's machlokes and about all that, but that's the way we're going to follow. Beis Hillel, who's more machmer, says both so'od and chametz, both bekazayis. Says the Gemara, "My tamay de Beis Shammai." I mean, normally, the isurim are connected to the shiurim of kazayis. Answers the Gemara, explaining Beis Shammai, Imkain lichtei v'rachmana chametz v'loy boya so'od. The Torah should have only mentioned the isur of Bal Yei Motzei chametz. And there would be no need to mention that there is an isur of owning so'ir, and va'ano amin, I would have known it on my own. How would I have known it? By saying, Ma chametz she'ein chimutzei kasha. Yet, the Torah says bekazayis, so b'meila so'ir she'chimutzei kasha is like kolchchen. And therefore, so'ir she'gaz rachman olamali, why did the Torah b'chlal have to mention the word so'ir concerning Bal Yei Motzei? Loy melach, that shiurei shel zeh, loy ki shiurei shel zeh. And don't forget, guys, when you learn one thing from the other, even if it's a kal v'chomer, but there's a counter of dayoy, right? L'bam men hadin liyes kenodin. It's not again. The point is that the Torah mentions so'ir to tell you that it's not the same shiur, and what we understand is, logically, never less than a kazayis. So that which chimutzei kasha is more chamur. So so'ir bekazayis, and chametz bekoisevis. Simple. However, Beis Hillel, he has to respond to that by telling you tzricha. The Torah did have to mention both. Farvos, the ikos of rachmana, so'ir havamina. That since chimutzei kasha, that's why you're violating owning it in your possession. One might have thought chevra avul chametz the ein chimutzei kasha eimoi loy. Now 1 second, guys. Don't think the Gemara means that Beis Hillel would have thought that there's no Bal Yei Motzei. No, the shiur of the Torah is a kazayis. If the Torah would have mentioned so'ir by a kazayis, then people would have said, that since the Torah did not mention chametz, the shiur of chametz is loy with the kazayas. They would have erroneously thought, like Beis Shammai. I love it. They would have thought that it would have been an akoiseves. That's why the Torah needs to mention chametz, to make it clear that chametz is also, you are already in violation of Bal Matzah, even if you only own a kazayas. Now, in the opposite, v'ikos v'rachmana chametz, you would have a kal v'chayber. I'm not making it more chametz, it should be the same. And Beis Hillel holds it is the same. But if the Torah only would have mentioned chametz, there is a tzad to say that chametz is more chamer than so'er. By the very fact that chametz is edible, many, even though normally the concept of a fence around the Torah normally is a rabbinic approach, but there are, according to some opinions, the oiraisas siyagim. Some people even understand, why can't you even own it? Midoiraisa, you shouldn't come to eat it. So chametz is something that you might eat. That's why you would make a siyag. Midoiraisa. But so'er, mishum deroi la'achila, avol so'er, sinsha enoi la'achila. Again, emaloi means not that you would have thought that you're never violating Bal Matzah, but maybe you would think that by so'er you have to own a koiseves or another shiur, but not less than that. That's why they are both needed, but now that the Torah mentioned both, they both share the same shiur. Beis Shammai, fragt die Gemara, leis lohu, that which Rab Zera says, now again, Rab Zera is an Amoyra, means the logic that he said the Beis Shammai will not subscribe to. What are we talking about? Rab Zera, pasach hakasav v'soir v'siyam v'chametz, chanan parshas boy. It's inconsistent. The Torah writes Shivas Yomim so'or lo yematzah bevotechem ki chol ha'oichel machmetzes v'nichrasa. Shivas Yomim so'or lo yematzah bevotechem. The Torah should have added ki chol ha'oichel so'or. The same pasuk begins with so'or and changed to chametz. Says Rab Zera, loy melach, zeu so'or v'zeu chametz, that they are the same. They share, in English, the same shiur in Lashon HaKodesh. No, okay, L'chayda Beis Shammai disagrees with this, says the Gemara, no. Rab Zera, using that pasuk, was speaking about Isur Achila, two different things. The Isur Achila is by a kazayis, L'kula Alma, by chametz and so'or. In Achila Kul Alma Pligi, the last narrow line, that you are in violation, God forbid, of chametz b'Pesach, if you eat violation, we're not talking about chatzi shiur osem in Torah, we're speaking about violation to be punished when you eat a kazayis. Ki pligi, our machlokes and Masechtas Beitzah, the first wide line. Now there's a word that's a little bit problematic. You would say, that the Gemara would say, li'inyon bal matzah. But that's the way we're learning pshat. When the Gemara writes the word here, li'inyon biur, why do you have to remove chametz from your possession, chevra? Not to violate bal matzah. That's the way we're going to learn the biur. We're good concerning our topic, which is Bal Matzah, which is why you have to remove it. Here is where Beis Shammai Savri lo yalfinun biur me'achila, even though the isur of achila by chametz is by a kazayas, but Bal Matzah is only if you have a koiseves. Let's learn pshat. So Beis Shammai is not viewing Bal Matzah as a biblical fence around, and Beis Hillel Savri that yes, yalfinun biur ma'achila. Now, there is a lot of talk here concerning chatzi shiur, because since we paskin, my friends, that chatzi shiur asur min haTorah, it's almost l'mayin afkemina. It's asur midoraisa, even less than the shiur. And there's a Chacham Tzvi that all in yeshiva we keep on learning about them. The Chacham Tzvi says that the concept of chatzi shiur is only concerning isurei achila. There is where we say chatzi shiur asur min haTorah. And taka, that resolves our problem here. Bal Matzah, there's no chatzi shiur asur min haTorah. So it's a very practical nafkamina. What is the minimum amount that someone, God forbid, will own for them to be in violation of Bal Matzah? Okay, weiter. Itmer nami. Amar Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina. That the machlokes in our Mishnah is only concerning biur. Biur meaning, biur is the positive mitzvah of removing it, which prevents us from violating the Bal Matzah. Because if you don't do biur, you're not violating eating. You're not eating just because you're on, but you're violating the Bal Matzah. And now finally, not only did we find this from Rabbi Yossi ben Rabbi Chanina, but we found a Beitzah, even better, a Tanya Nami Hachi, when it says, V'lo Yeira. Now guys, the Pasuk Pashut is written wrong. That's why the Messiah Sashas amends it. V'lo Yeira locha chametz, V'lo Yeira locha sa'oir, Zeu machloike shebein Beishamai u'Beis. Not concerning don't eat, concerning not owning. Beishamai oimrim that shiur is bikazayis, but Beishamai lekula holds that chametz is only in violation if a person owns a koiseves amount, a date amount. Ubeis Hillel oimrim zevazeh bikazayis. All right, Baruch Hashem, we have time, and now let's start. Let's see how far we can get to learn to analyze the final machlokes, the third machlokes in the Mishnah on Daf Beis. Beishamai is lekula. When you shech the behema, any domesticated animal, there is no obligation to cover its blood. When it comes to a person shechting a kosher chaya or a kosher fowl, bird, including chickens, we know this from kaparas, there is a mitzvahs asay midoiraisa to cover the dam be'ofer. We're going to learn some details about it. And we're going to just to speak out, to get the offer from the ground, potentially, you're going to violate chodesh, because when you dig into the ground, just making a furrow in the ground is chodesh. When you remove earth, you make a hole. If you remember from Shabbos, that's boina. There's an issue of muktzah, the earth itself is muktzah. Then there is taking a clod of earth, but making it, breaking it down to cover it. That is called grinding. You're grinding the earth. So in potential, you're going to be violating 3 avos and 1 quasi-biblical, the big chamur dikamutza. Nevertheless, Beishamai seems to be saying, now we're going to figure out exactly what he says. The wordings don't fit the way you normally read the words of a Mishnah. Ha-shoichet, just quickly, we can go back into the Mishnah to read the words. It's beautiful. Ha-shoichet chayva oif b'yontif. Now I want you to know that normally whenever the Tanach says ha-shoichet, it's already mashma b'di'evet. Normally. If you shecht it, here it's going to be very problematic to learn that way. That will be the first thing we're going to focus on. So Beishamai says, Yachbor b'deker, dig with a spade. The digging with the spade, we're not going to have enough time today. But I want you to know that digging with a spade will mean that, of course, that if you have to violate doiraisas, you may not. A heads up, the spade is already in the ground. And therefore, the chadisha happened before. We're not done yet. There's going to be issues, but what about making binyan? The Gemara is going to have to answer that. What about muktzahs already at the Rabbanan? Oh. So now that you shechted, now you have an obligation to cover the blood. So in this case, you will be allowed to put aside the rabbinic restriction to fulfill a biblical obligation. The question is, can you create such a scenario? Hashoichet, now we'll get to the hashoichet. So Beishamai says yes, Yachbor b'deker v'yechasa b'seloimim lo yishchoit, unless you had offer muchen, then there's no problem.
Can't you wait for tomorrow to cover it?
No, you can't wait till tomorrow to cover it. And on the other hand, just to speak out, that there is a mitzvah, simchas yomtiv, which would lean for you to shecht it, for you to have meat. And even if you have meat that was shechted yesterday, fresher, the better. And then Beis Hillel says, umoidim, that will be a problem. Umoidim means Beis Hillel is going to Beis Shammai. She'im shachad, that if you already shechted, sheyachber b'deker v'yechasa. In other words, whatever the case of Beis Shammai is, at the end Beis Hillel says, b'di'evet, you can do it. Which l'chayre would mean that Beis Shammai is saying you can do it l'chatchila. The problem is with the word hashoichet. Let's begin reading. Oh, it's late. Hashoichet, the word hashoichet normally means di'evet. If you shechted, the evidin lachatchila loy. If that's pshat in Beis Shammai, then how is Beis Hillel arguing? If that's the case, Beis Hillel lo yishchait. Beis Hillel used the words, don't do it lachatchila. So which one is it? So without reading umoidim, before you come to the end, I would argue haloi kashem, that what Beis Hillel means is lo yishchait v'yechasa ka'amar. Even after the shechita, don't do it. Problem is, no. Beis Hillel clearly doesn't say that. He says, umoidim she'im shachat. Umoidim here is Beis Hillel lib Beis Shammai she'yachber b'deker v'yechasa. Istach mechlal dereisha lav deyeveru. Notice, who is saying what? So Amar Rabba Hachi Ka Amar Hashoichet, and Rashi writes that Afal Gav. I'm reading inside Rashi towards the end of the narrow lines. That even though the word Hashoichet Da'alma in the Welt means in all the other works of Tanoim, the Yeved Al Karchach Hachi Lechatchila Hashoichet Sheba Lishchait. But he wants to shecht, but he wants to know whether he's allowed to shecht or not. So he's asking a Rav Sheba Li Malech, the shoichet that wants to shecht, and he knows that he's shechting a chaya or an oiv. Keitzad oimer loy. What should a Rav tell him? Beishamai oimrim. Beishamai holds that the Rav should tell him first shchoit. That means lachatchila. Now you created a scenario where there is a mitzvah say to cover. As we'll explain tomorrow, the scenario here is where covering is only a rabbinic violation. But now that you have a chiyuv midoraisa to cover, we're going to set aside the rabbinic restriction. And now, chafoir v'chasei, finish digging, as we'll and then cover. Ubeisil aloimrim, that we'll tell him lo yishchait. Ela imkein hoyelei offer muchamim b'yodiyim. That's approach number one. Rabbi Yosef Amar, another interpretation. Hachi ka Amar. Again, it begins. Hashoichet means the case of the Mishnah is prior to Shechita. Prior to Shechita, the shoichet is hesitating. He's coming to ask a question. Habali Malach. Keitzad oimrim loy. Watch it off. Tell him. Beishamai oimrim. Now listen to this detail. Beishamai tells him not for shecht. Now you have a psachiyuv. Now you can finish digging. They tell him dig the earth first. In our case, then shecht and then cover. Even more kuladik. Why would Beishamai say that? If there isn't yet a chiyuv, we'll see in a moment. And Basila tells him, Lo yishchait nekuda. Not only can you not dig now, don't shecht. Elam kain. And by the way, the Gemara doesn't have to speak out the Seifa. Then the Mishnah says, if he didn't ask the question, if he already shechted, then they're both moida that you can cover. Now, Amalei Abayel Rabbi Yosef. He hears a machlokes between Rabbi Yosef and Rabba.
Not considering the Tmina?
Nachamo?
He's covering, considering Tmina to Tmana?
No, it's not. No, and that itself is not always a doirais. Okay. You're not cooking anything. It's nothing over here. Amalei Abayel Rabbi Yosef. Abaye was the students of both of them. Leima mar v'rabba b'derabzeira marav komefligisu. That you're arguing regarding that which he taught the Amar Rabzeira Marav. Like the mitzvah now of kisui dam ba'ofar. Does it mean aleph? There's dam, cover it with earth, or does it mean that you have to make an effort to have earth under it and over it, for the dam to be inside the earth? Be'ofar. And the source of this mitzvah is a pasuk in Acharei Mois, where it says, "V'shafach es damai v'chisohu be'ofar mitabeis." Says Rab Zeira Marav ofar leinemar ela be'ofar. And now he fears Zois, the Abai, the Talmud, the Mari, speaking to Rabbi Yosef, that you hold like Rab Zeira. So once Beishamai says you can shecht, you have to shecht on offer. An offer doesn't mean the ground earth. It means that's why the Rav tells him, now Yachbar Bedeker, already have the earth, shecht on that earth, and then cover with more of it. V'Rabba Leisle de Rab Zeira. Amalei, says Rav Yosef to Abaye, Bein L'Didi, Bein L'Rabba, normally, Islam de Rab Zeira. But this is our argument. That offer lamata only if there is already offered previously. Then will Beishamai allow you to shecht? There has to be offer. And if there is no offer, even the Beishamai don't shecht. Now the problem will be, why not? We are going to explain tomorrow how getting offered in our case is a rabbinic problem, but not a biblical problem. And if the mitzvah of kisui dam ba'ofar and the act of shechita for simchas yantav justifies overriding a derabanan why not beforehand? But let's just get these rules clear. We hold to this din. There has to be afar lamata aside of the afar lamayla. And if there is no afar lamata, you can't shecht even lebei shamai. Why? Because chayshinan demamimlach v'loy shachet. When are you allowed to violate this derabanan? As we'll see, it's only a derabanan if you actually shecht it. If you're not going to shecht, even in the case that we're going to speak about, that the spade was already in the ground and the earth is already very loose, v'chulei, and v'lach hashem yitzricha leguf, it's only derabanan. You can only do it if you're doing the mitzvah of shchitam. It's shayach that after you're going to prepare the earth, your wife is going to say, honey, I found a chicken in the freezer. I don't need it. So you have to first shecht. Or ledidi, take out the word adarabah. Hadifa. No, don't make these conditions. No. Once you start preparing the earth, you're going to shecht. And the counter, you're going to tell a yid, if you don't have the earth prepared, don't shecht. What about simchas yantiv? So the balance between Abaya and Rabbi Yosef is everyone subscribes to Rab Zera. I just want to open up the next line. The one thing will be, guys, this is both lebei shamai and lebei silo. If there needs to be a violation of an isur da'oraisa, which is, as we mentioned, charisha, binyan, grinding, tchina, muksa, in such a case you can't shecht. When the isur is only midrabanan, that is where lebei shama you can lechatchila shecht, and even lebei silul that says don't shecht. Lebei silul himself is moida that if you shechted, then you can cover with earth. In other words, can you create a scenario where there's going to be a conflict between the Daraisa and the Rabbanan, where you know that the Daraisa is going to overrule the Rabbanan? Beis Hillel says, don't create that Metzias, and Beis Shammai allows you to do it. And we'll stop over here, 3 lines from the bottom, and the Gemara is going to have to explain why is it only a Rabbanan. To be continued.